So this chapter is words of frequency, and we're learning these vocabulary words to do with never, rarely, sometimes, often, and always. So we've got an example sentence here, which is 저는 책을 가끔 읽어요. I sometimes read books. And the sometimes is this 가끔, which is one of our words of frequency. So this is really more vocab than grammar. These are just individual vocabulary words that you basically just kind of have to memorize. There's some main ones here. We have 절대, never, 별로, rarely, 가끔, sometimes, which is what we had in the sentence above, 자주, meaning often, and 항상, meaning always. So all of these are pretty common in Korean, especially 자주. 자주 is used a lot. And there's actually also another one, which is not in this list, but it's pretty common as well, and that's 종종. 종종, I usually translate it myself to like every now and then, or like from time to time. So it's kind of similar to 자주, and it also is used quite a bit as well. So that's sort of also a useful one. And then we have a note here that it's most natural to place the frequency verb right before or as close as possible to the verb. Do they always go before the verb and after the object? Not necessarily. So in general, the tip that I give you is like where to place them is to put it near the verb, just to make it clear that that's what you sometimes do or that's what you rarely do or whatever. You will see them kind of placed all over the place. It's kind of similar to English, how you can kind of place these things in different ways depending on the sentence. Sometimes there are sentences that kind of sound good with it in a certain place, and if you're not a native speaker, like there's no way to know what that is. So my general advice is just to put it before the verb. After the object is fine, but it doesn't matter too much as long as people understand what you're saying. So we'll look at some example sentences below as well, so you can see sort of where it's placed and where they're used. Okay. Generally, you don't start with a frequency word. I can say that much. Usually you don't. Oh, actually, no, sometimes you do. Never mind. It's really, they can kind of be placed in multiple places. So let's look at some sentences using some frequency words. So again, these ones are kind of just memorization. I don't know how to say that word. Anyway, you just have to kind of learn these words. But once you know them, we can make sentences like, I never exercise. So 저는 운동을 절대, this is 절대 never, 안 해요. And notice that there's an 안 here. Now, when you're learning Korean, you might think this is like a double negative, right? Because you have 절대, okay, 절대 is never, and you have 안, which means not, right? We have this 안 grammar form, which you can place before verbs to make it not that verb. So 안 해요 means I don't do something. So we have this 안 here, right? So it kind of looks like I never not do it. If you were to translate this literally to English, you might think that's what it's saying. But that's actually not the case. And I have a note about this below, actually. We can talk about that briefly now. There's an important note, specifically when you're using these two, 절대 and 별로. They always have to go in negative sentences. You can't use them in regular sentences without having a negative. So, for example, we have a sentence here. 저는 음악을 별로 안 들어요. So 저는 me, 음악 is music, and then 별로 is from up here, our rarely. 안 is our not, and this is the verb 듣다, which is a irregular verb, so it becomes 들어요. 저는 음악을 별로 안 들어요. It means I don't really listen to music. Music don't really listen to. So this is a correct sentence, right? You need this 안. Or you need like a G 않다. You could also say like 저는 음악을 별로 듣지 않아요. I don't really listen to music. 별로 듣지 않아요. So, a sentence like this, which is 저는 음악을 별로 들어요, is not grammatically correct. Because it doesn't have the negative. It's just a regular sentence. And it's funny because even to me, I'm not a native speaker, but even to me, this sentence looks very strange. Because I've kind of picked up over time, I guess, that it always needs to be negative. So be careful with that. If you're using 절대 and 별로, you've got to have a negative sentence and try and avoid literally translating it to English because it's not a double negative. It doesn't mean, I never not. It's just the way that it kind of has to go. This is the book, Conversational Korean Grammar, and this is the cover right here. Okay, so that's just a little note. We can also see it in this sentence here with this 저는 요리를 별로 안 해요. 저는 요리 is cooking, 별로 is rarely or not often, 안 해요. I don't often cook. So I rarely cook or I don't really cook, for example, are possible translations for that. Okay, so now let's look at some of these sentences and have a go at translating them into English. Are you learning Korean? Yes, I am learning Korean. Okay, so this one here, this third one, let's look at this. 저는 is me or I, so if me is the topic, and then 책. Does anyone know what this word 책 is in Korean? This word 책. I'm sure somebody knows. If you were to translate 책 into English, book. Yes, beautiful, perfect. 책 is book. And now 자주 is often. You can see it up here. 자주 is often. And this 읽어요, you can probably guess. But 읽다 is the word to read. So what does this sentence mean if I was going to translate it into English? 저는 책을 자주 읽어요. Yes, 읽어요 means to read. So 저는 책을 자주 읽어요. How would you perhaps read that? Translate. Hardly or belt. Yes, perfect. I often read books, or I read books often. Yes, that's both great translations. Those are both perfectly good translations for that. Question, when do you go do live? Usually around this time on various days, on days where I am up for it. Okay, what about this next one? 저는 책을 가끔 사요. So 가끔 is this sometimes. And what about 사다? What is 사다? If you were to translate that to English, this verb is, you don't want to give anything away. I'm guessing you're Korean. Yes. You can, don't give any secrets. Yes, 사다 means to buy. So this verb is to buy. And we're still talking about books. Yes, debo, perfect. I sometimes buy books. Because 가끔 is sometimes. 저는, as for me, 책을, books, sometimes buy. I sometimes buy books. Beautiful. And this last one, 저는 항상 일해요. Hopefully no one out here is living this life, but it might be a sentence that applies to you at least sometimes. 저는, again, is as for me. 항상 is always. And 일하다, yes, debo, perfect. 일하다 is to work. So this sentence means I always work. You are, I'm sorry. I know sometimes it's like that. Hopefully not forever. I always work. This book is Conversational Korean Grammar, and this is the cover. You can buy it in Canada from Amazon. Okay, so I always work is another example. So this is kind of a short chapter talking about these words of frequency. Ultimately, it's kind of just comes down to remembering these words and then placing them in the sentence, usually close to the verb, with the key note to remember that with these negative forms, 별로 and 절대, have to go in negative sentences. We talked about this briefly before, but another example of this here is this concert one. So we have 저는 콘서트에 절대 안 가요. I never go to concerts. We have 절대 meaning never, and 가요 meaning go. And this 안 means not. But remember, it does not mean I never not go. That is not what this means. It just has to be negative to make the sentence, I never go to concerts. So a sentence like 저는 콘서트에 절대 가요 is not correct because it's missing that negative. Even for me, this sentence feels very strange, feels very odd. If you say this sort of thing, people will probably understand what you mean, but it's just not very natural. How long did it take me to learn Korean? I've been learning Korean for about 5 years, and it's partially self-taught and partially taught in classes. I did a course at a university in Korea, and I've also taken classes here in the US as well. So a bit of both. Okay, so that is kind of all we have for this chapter. It's very short, it's just 1 page. This book is Conversational Korean Grammar. So unless there's other questions about this, I'll move on to the next chapter,